Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckcom. Hey, before we get into the next episode, do me a favor if you like the show. Rate it, like it, share it, subscribe to it on YouTube or whatever podcasting app you use. The reason I ask you to do that is because all the companies that run these podcasting apps and YouTube, the algorithm really likes it when a lot of people share and comment and rate and stuff like that, interact with the episode. And so the more you do that, the more people that do that, the more it kind of filters up higher in the podcasting rankings, and the more people will see it, and the better guests I'll get, and the more I'll be able to do it. I'm not getting paid for this, and neither are my guests, but I'm having a great time, and I hope you like it. And if you do, please engage with it on the podcasting app. My next guest is my favorite college athlete of all time for a lot of different reasons. But more importantly, he is a true leader. He is a leader by example, and he is a leader and has always been a leader since the moment he was an adult. I'm talking about Bucky Richardson. Bucky Richardson was a quarterback at Texas A&M back in the late 80s and early 90s. He actually went to A&M after they had won 2 conference championships as a freshman and played in like the second or third game, I think. And in his first game as a true freshman, he took it 82 yards for a touchdown against Brett Favre. Bucky had a fantastic college football career. He won 2 conference championships. They won 3 bowl games, including the 1990 Holiday Bowl, where we absolutely dismantled BYU after BYU had said they were too good to play us. We talk a lot about that football game in the podcast. Bucky and I also talk about the fact that he has a son, not surprisingly, who is a phenomenal football player. And Bucky talks about his philosophy about how he's coached up not only his son, but other kids, how he looks at motivation, what he does to encourage kids, what he does when his own son has a good and bad game. We talk a lot about leadership in general. We talk about what it was like for him to be so popular, so young. I mean, Bucky Richardson was truly Johnny Football and Cam Newton and Vince Young before any of those guys came around and before social media. So we talk a little bit about what it was like to be 18 years old and be thrust into the spotlight like he was. We also talk about his business career and some of the things he's done in business, who his mentors were, his mindset about business and life in general, and a lot of other things. I got to tell you, in all honesty, I was a huge fan of Bucky Richardson, and always have been. After this podcast, my admiration for him has increased even more, and I didn't even think that was possible. But getting to sit down and talk to him about these issues was one of the most fulfilling and enjoyable things I've done in a very, very long time. Bucky and I talk a lot about a lot of great stuff, and boy, I'll tell you what, he is definitely the definition of a leader. And now I give you John, Pal, Bucky Richardson. Hey, everybody. Brian Beckcom here. And I have got John Pal Richardson, who some people also know as Bucky Richardson. Bucky, how are you doing today, man?
Good, Brian. Doing fine, bud. Glad to be visiting with you, and I'm happy for the success of your podcast. It's you've had some great guests.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I got to ask you right out of the gate. You and I have known each other for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I was playing basketball at A&M when you were playing football, and I played for a year. So we kind of ran in somewhat of the same circles. But where'd you get your nickname? Where's Bucky come from?
Yeah, I've been asked that a few times through the years. Actually, I was 10 years old, and we had our baseball coach, our summer baseball coach, was a fairly young guy. And I think him trying to make it fun for us, he decided that he was going to give everybody a nickname instead of, doing the standard last name on your jersey kind of thing. So everybody on our team had a nickname, and I happened to be playing shortstop back then, and Bucky Dent was the shortstop for the Yankees.
Sure.
And I don't know that he put much thought into that. He just he said, "I'm gonna put Bucky on his jersey," and that's what he did. And it was weird because for about a year, only a few people would refer to me as Bucky. and my coach being one of them. And then a few friends started calling me Bucky, and then more friends, and then teachers. And then before you know it, I mean, it just kind of grew.
Yeah.
And I hated it at first. You know, I didn't like it. There's a lot of mean things 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds can say with a nickname like that. But I just accepted it. You know, you can't control it. And but it was weird. Eventually, I can remember starting to sign my name that way because that's how everybody knew me.
Yeah.
So it was over a few years before it really was catching on good. But yeah, that's how I got it.
Does anybody call you John, pal, like maybe when you're in trouble with your folks or something?
Well, my it's weird. My mom and my sister and my brother still call me John.
But everybody else calls you Bucky.
Everybody else calls me Bucky, yeah.
Well, how's your family doing, Bucky?
Good. My sweet mom's still in Baton Rouge, doing great. She still works part-time. She's been a legal secretary for, God, long time, 40 years for the same firm.
Nice.
They're in Baton Rouge, and my sister's in Baton Rouge, and my brother's actually just moved back to Houston. He was up in North Carolina for a while, but he's back in Houston now, him and his wife and family. So everybody's doing good. My father passed away in 2005.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody's doing well, healthy.
And you've got a son who, not surprisingly, is a fantastic athlete, fantastic football player. He's going to be, I think, is this his freshman year playing college football?
No, he's got one more year of high school. He's a senior in high school this fall. There at Ridge Point. And yeah, I appreciate you saying that. He plays receiver.
Yeah.
Works extremely hard and loves the game. And that was, that's my greatest gift for me.
Yeah.
Is that he loves the game that I love and has meant so much to me. And yeah, he just committed to Oklahoma State. He's gonna play at Oklahoma State, and they've done a great job of recruiting him, and he's going to graduate early.
Nice.
From high school and go in January. And
nice.
Stillwater, here we come, I guess.
Well, Bucky, let me ask you a couple questions about that. First of all, for people that aren't, a lot of people listening will be college football fans, but a lot of people maybe won't follow college football. And for people that don't follow college football that close, to be a wide receiver for Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State is a big deal. The Big 12 throws the ball a lot. They got a lot of good receivers. So, your son's a very, very high-level athlete. I want to ask you, Bucky, as a high-level athlete yourself, how, give us some tips, maybe as parents of athletes or as coaches of athletes. You talk about how your son, his name is John Paul, I think, right?
Yeah, I didn't, and I don't know why. I didn't want a junior.
Yeah.
And of course, my real name is John, and my dad's name was Paul. So I figured that would be a good way to kind of include my dad and me with my son. And so that's what we went with.
And how did you, like when John Paul was younger, as the parent of an aspiring athlete and somebody who played very high level sports yourself, how did you deal with that as a parent? Because, some parents, I think, and you were a coach of youth sports teams and did all the stuff that a lot of us have done. And you've seen parents that can get a little nuts about sports, to say the very least.
Sure.
And then, then there's others that, you never see them at the game at all. So how did you manage that balance between encouraging your son, maybe pushing him to get better a little bit, and then, but not being too much of a crazy parent type?
Yeah. I think I just did what my father did to me. I mean, my dad never pushed me or was real critical of me. He encouraged me, and he was my father, and a soft place for me to fall, if you will.
Yep.
And that's pretty much how I handle John Paul. I'm as competitive as anybody. But I alluded to it a little earlier. I was so focused on making sure his experiences as a young kid were good, so he would continue to want to play.
Yeah.
And of course, I coached him up and I coached him hard, like I did all the kids. But I loved them equally as much. You know, for every criticism, you know, you should hug them, and that's kind of how I did it. I just wanted him to fall in love with the game. So when he gets to high school, he's motivated and he can taste it almost and see it, and then go do what you do, go be what you can be, whatever that is. And everybody has different levels of, you know, what the top side's going to be. And some of it's God-given and some of it's how hard you work. So that's really what I focused on. You know, even now, it's so much harder as a parent watching your son.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, man, no kidding. But,
Then
you know,
when I was
on the
playing-
other side, on the flip side of that, Bucky, you know, I tell people, for example, when I take my kids fly fishing, it's nice catching a fish yourself, but watching your kids catch a fish is about 1,000,000 times better. So it was nice being a high school athlete and playing in the state championship game and stuff, but watching your kids do something like that, to me, is like 1,000,000 times better, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt. Now, I mean, I enjoy every minute of it, and I see how much he loves it and how hard he works at it. And, you know, you just, as a parent, like any parent, you want your kids to make good decisions and to put themselves in a position to have some success, whatever that is. And that's really what my wife and I have tried to do. But man, watching them is way more stressful than playing. That's for sure.
No
That's
doubt.
for sure.
My son just found out yesterday. We were talking right before the podcast. He just found out he made the varsity basketball team, and at Memorial High School, that is extremely competitive. Yeah, there was only 5 juniors that made the varsity, and there's 2,000 plus students at the school. So really, I was really nervous about it, and real happy it happened. But, you know, I read this book, Bucky, years ago that really made a big impression on me, and it was called Mindset, by some professor. I think her name was Carol Dweck, but it basically said there was two ways of encouraging kids. One was to say, for example, you're so talented, you've got so much talent, or you're so smart, like you're really good in math, and that's one way to do it. And the other way to do it is to encourage them to work hard, to practice. One's called a fixed and one's called a growth mindset. And the problem is, if you tell your kid they're too good too often, when they fail, they're like, well, I guess I'm not good enough. Whereas if you say, man, you really worked hard, you earned that, then if they run into some obstacles, then they just work harder. So speak to that a little bit, because you talked about how, you know, I think this is a really, really important point. Once a kid, or anybody really, has a little taste of success, then the motivation becomes internal, right? It's no longer a dad or mom or coach or whoever. It's their own internal motivation. So talk a little bit about, as somebody who, and I want to talk about some of the coaches that you played for, but you played for some Hall of Fame coaches. You were an incredible athlete yourself. How do you look at, like, the techniques of encouraging and coaching kids?
Well, I think, everybody being around, the little league and the youth leagues and now in high school, everybody focuses on the success part.
Yeah.
And handling success can be tricky, but it's really not a gut check. I think I've always tried to talk to my son about failures, when things don't go like you want them to go. And really not enough focus is on that side of it, because the best of the best players, the good players, the great players, handle adversity better than others.
Yeah.
Because, when you're playing football and, at quarterback in particular, but really any position, there's so much failure that goes along with it, and it's how you process it and handle it. And you've got to get to a point where it won't affect your next play.
Yeah.
And you have to have the short memory, as you heard before, I'm sure.
For sure.
So I talked to John Paul a lot about that, body language and handling adversity. And, again, kids put so much pressure on themselves already. I think back when I was playing, how much pressure I put on myself to perform. And that's so much pressure, and it weighs so heavy on children. I would look forward to seeing my dad, because I knew I was just going to get a hug, and he's going to say how proud he was of me and tell me I did great.
Yeah.
And so I didn't forget that. And when my son comes home, it's dad. It's hugs and proud of you, and just talk about the game and in general. I'm not ever critical. I want to be his dad and his biggest fan. And really, I don't try to be tricky about it. I try to be open and honest and show him that I got his back, and that's kind of how I go about it, Brian. I mean, I see a lot of dads get real technical, and they're coached 90% of the time. And that's not what kids need, in my opinion. And that's not the way to do it, in my opinion.
That's right.
But that's just my opinion. And, so that's what I focus on, and that's it seemed to have worked well so far.
Absolutely. And, Bucky, I think it's fair to say, and I think you'll agree with this, there are some very high-level athletes that when they're done with sports, they don't do so well. Mm-hmm. And, they either have money problems or other kind of problems, and there's all sorts of different reasons for that. But, one of the things that I like to keep in mind with my kids who are all playing sports now is eventually they're not going to be playing competitive sports. Right. And so what are we doing here? I mean, I think what we're doing here is we're trying to use sports as a mechanism for teaching character, teaching leadership. And I think what you just brought up is a phenomenal point. Learning how to deal with failure or with adversity is, one of the best life skills you can get. I tell people this, when I go try cases, every time I'm done with a trial, I write notes about how the trial went, what I would do differently, what I wouldn't do differently. And what I found is I don't lose many cases, but when I win cases, the notes are something like, "Oh, you're great. Keep doing what you're doing." Yeah. But when I lose a case, it's like 10 pages of stuff to work on. And so the point I tell people is, and I tell the lawyers that work for me, you don't learn a whole lot from winning all the time. Where you learn your lessons is when you run into obstacles, right?
That's correct. I mean, the greatest teaching points coaching children that I found is when you lost a game.
Yeah.
I mean, you can reinforce so many things and still be positive about it. But man, you can really teach kids a lot when they're crying or they're sad and they lost a close game. It's to me, it's more difficult to try to tell kids you need to work harder when you're winning.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to continue to work hard and improve. And like you said, that's life. You're going to get a lot of bloody noses along the way, and the great ones can handle that and get off the mat and keep trucking.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Bucky, you I think it's fair to say that you are one of the most popular athletes in Texas A&M history. I mean, easily top 5 for the vast majority of us. And you're also, I think it's fair to say, one of the more popular college football players of all time. And so I want to talk a little bit about your college football experience and what it was about your style of play and what you did that made you such a leader, that made so many people want to follow you. But a lot of people don't know that you were originally from Louisiana. And I think, tell me if I'm remembering this right, when you were trying to decide, you were a very good baseball and a very good football player in high school, and you were trying to decide between, I think, LSU and A&M.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I think, tell me if I'm remembering this right, you made your decision, I think, right on signing day. You were pretty close to going to LSU and then made your decision. So am I remembering that right? And if so, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was pretty close to signing day. It wasn't the day, but I had growing up in Baton Rouge, I grew up about 15 miles from Tiger Stadium.
Yeah.
You know, my dad would take me to LSU games since I could remember. And, you know, that was always kind of, you know, it'd be cool to be able to play college one day, much less LSU or a place like A&M.
Sure.
But as I got older and got in a position where I was getting recruited and doing that, LSU head coach at the time was a guy named Bill Arnsparger, who went on to the NFL my senior year. And he and I had a real good relationship, like I did with Coach Sherrill, who was recruiting me at A&M, along with Lynn Amity, who's a Louisiana guy as
Sure.
well.
Sure.
And so when Arnsparger left, that opened my eyes more about how important your relationship is with your coach. And Jackie was as relentless as anybody, and Lynn, and A&M had just come off two back-to-back Southwest Conference championships. So the program was in good standing. It had good players. That recruiting class was getting better and better by the week. It seemed like, I think we ended up with the #1 recruiting class in the country that year.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I just, when I came on my visit to A&M, me and my mom and dad, and we had a great tour of the campus. And this lady that showed us around was just phenomenal and patient. And because we had a million questions. And you know, I think after that campus tour, I said, this is where I want to be. And I just, those kind of decisions, those big decisions that you make, you educate yourself and then you follow your gut.
Love that.
You follow your instinct.
Yeah.
And my gut was telling me this was the place I needed to go. And I did it. And I can remember calling LSU. I was so nervous calling LSU to tell them that I had chosen Texas A&M and I was going to commit, you know, that night.
Yeah, they don't let kids from Louisiana get out of Baton Rouge that easy, right? That doesn't happen that often. Yeah.
Yeah, and the aftermath of that was, some of it was pretty brutal. You know, some of the hate mail and, you know, how could you do that? You know, just
17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid getting hate mail. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, that's pretty standard. You know, they're passionate about it, like they are at A&M. And I tell you, I'm so glad I did, because I knew one person at A&M, a guy named Wally Hartley, who played tight end at my high school. He was 2 years older than me. So he'd been at A&M a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I knew one guy, but leaving my home, you know, my mom and dad and family, and getting in my car and driving 6 hours to College Station, I grew up fast. And
sure.
I was homesick probably for a year, trying to work through all that stuff. But once I got situated and acclimated and being able to play as a true freshman, I really didn't have time to worry too much about anything. But I tell you, it's just a great place. And the hardest decision I probably ever had to make, but it ended up being the best decision I ever made too. And
well, you said some really good things there as it relates to leadership. One of which I almost got chills down my spine when you said this, was at the end of the day, you can analyze the decision up and down all you want, but when your gut is telling you something, when your instincts are telling you something, you're smart to listen to it. And I'll tell you what, Bucky, it took me a long time to realize that. It wasn't until I was maybe in my late 30s that I started to look back on my life and say, you know, the times where I ignored my instincts, ignored my guts, bad decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I read this book by a international security guy. He provides security for like Jeff Bezos and all these famous people. His name's Gavin DeBecker. But he wrote a book about giving advice to people about personal security. And one of the things he says in it is trust your instincts. If something's off, you know, if you're at a gas station and something's off, you should listen to your instincts because they're there for a reason. It's the same thing with making any decisions like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Trust your gut, and most of the time, you're going to make a good decision, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I tell my parents, I tell my kids that all the time. I mean, we try to educate them on good and bad, and right and wrong, and making good decisions, and that kind of stuff, is all of us parents do. But I tell them, mom and dad are not going to be there all the time, and wherever you are, however old you are, if your instinct is telling you I need to get out of here, you get out of there.
Yeah, exactly.
And most of the time, you're going to be right. And two, on top of that, you're not going to miss anything either.
Yeah. Follow
your instinct. I'm a big believer in that, for sure. And I talk about it all the time with my kids,
Well, I remember, and you all remember this, but I showed up to A&M in 1991. They didn't call it this back then, but I was a preferred walk-on, which meant I had a spot on the basketball team. I didn't have to try out. But man, the first day I was there, Bucky, I went over to Milstead. I was in the locker room getting changed or something. And I think it might've been Sam Adams, maybe Eric England. It was two of the big defensive lineman recruits, big dudes. And they walked up to me and they said, "Hey man, welcome to the football team. You're the kicker," right? Because I weighed about 180 pounds at the time. But Bucky, the reason I bring that up is because I remember lifting. Milstead was where the athletes used to lift weights, and we had these names up on the wall, people that had the best 40-yard dash, best bench press, squat, Olympic lifts, all this. And as a quarterback, with guys like Quentin Coriat on the team, I remember seeing your name up there as one of the strongest guys on the Texas A&M football team. And so you were kind of, I want to say that you were a really unique player. I mean, you were a quarterback who wore one of those damn neck braces that middle linebackers wore, right? I mean, quarterbacks don't wear those anymore. And so and then you come to A&M. We're coming off 2 very good seasons, so it's not like it was a rebuilding thing or something. And you play your freshman year, and I think your first game you ran for an 82-yard touchdown, if I'm remembering that right.
Yeah.
So what is it like? Because you and it's kind of funny. You and I are basically the polar opposites of college athlete. I was a walk-on and I played in 8 games and scored 2 points. You come in, you're the quarterback of a very prominent Division I football team, and you're a freshman. All of a sudden you're starting at 18 years old and you're successful. So what was that like?
It was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Really. I think the work that I did in high school and the off season with the weights, we had a U.S. Olympic coach, powerlifting coach in Baton Rouge, a guy by the name of Gail Hatch.
Nice.
He was there at a local club, and he was very selective about the athletes he let work out with him. And he had one rule: if you miss a workout, don't come back.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was kind of ingrained to me that was something that just was going to get done. I mean, it was a priority in my day. And he was the big, we did a lot of power cleans, a lot of platform work, they call it, a lot of power cleans, clean and jerk, a lot of Olympic lifts. And those movements and those lifts are so good for football.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I was able to get in a position to play as a freshman, true freshman, was physically I was ready to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids that get to college are really, really good players. They're just not quite there physically. And you see it a lot in the O lineman and D lineman, right? Because
Sure.
That's so much more of a physical position. They need a year or two to get their bodies where they can stay healthy and be productive.
Yeah.
But I really think that put me in that position where the coaches kept saying, okay, well, maybe he is ready physically. And as he learned enough mentally with the playbook and that kind of thing. So I attribute early playing time to just physically being ready to take take the hits and to compete at that level. And thanks to Gail Hatch and a lot of those guys back in Baton Rouge that prepared me. But you know, it was fast moving. I mean, it was blowing by me. You know, the plan was to redshirt. You know, Kevin Murray had left the year before, so Craig Stump was there. He was a fifth-year senior and a great guy, and he mentored me, he helped me a ton. He's now the head coach here locally in Houston at Atascocita.
Nice. I didn't know that. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and doing great. So he was a big positive influence to me my freshman year. You know, we were playing in Jackson, Mississippi. I want to say it was the second or third game. Maybe
do you remember the quarterback on the
team? Yeah. A scrub named Brett Favre.
Yeah.
He was a redshirt freshman.
Okay.
At Southern Miss in 1987. And you know, the game goes on and you know, you could tell instantly that Brett Favre was pretty dadgum good, and nobody had ever heard of him back then. And he was throwing the ball around and making plays, and it was a close game. And we were struggling a little bit on offense, and Darren Lewis and I got the ball a lot in that game, and we both played a lot in that game. And Darren had a bunch of yards, and I was able to break a long run and move the offense a little bit. But I remember when Coach Sherrill, we never talked about it going into that game that week. It was never brought up. And Coach Sherrill just walked over to me on the sideline just so casually, and he said, "Get loose, you're going in next series."
Oh, man.
I mean, of course I thought he was kidding, you know. I said, "You do what?"
Yeah, right.
I couldn't believe it. And I said, are you sure I'm going in next series? He goes, "Yeah, get loose." So then it took me about 3 minutes to find my helmet. And, you know, all these things are racing through your mind. But yeah, it blew by. I'm grateful that Coach Sherrill gave me the opportunity. You know, I mean, that's if coaches don't trust you, they won't play you.
Well, it's not just that he gave you the opportunity, Bucky. You're humble, like most of the leaders I've talked to. You know, doing this podcast, it's been super cool because I've been able to see whether it's a U.S. congressman, Coach Slocum, Coach Sherrill, a Marine combat veteran, all these leaders. There's patterns, and one of them is most of the leaders I talked to are pretty humble. So it wasn't just so you're a humble guy, but it wasn't just that Coach Sherrill gave you an opportunity. It's that you took advantage of that opportunity. And it's kind of interesting to me because, you know, I hope you don't mind me making this comparison, but you were Johnny Football before Johnny Football. You before social media and all that stuff. And, you know, it's interesting because I think one of Johnny Manziel's first big plays was an 80-something yard touchdown run. And I want to say it was against Southern Mississippi. It was very similar to your situation, but you come in there as a true freshman and basically lead the team to victory. And then after that, your career is like something out of a movie. I mean, 3 Southwest Conference championships, I think, 2 bowl games. Maybe I've got those flipped around. You're the MVP.
Yeah, two championships, 3 bowl games. Yeah.
So, you know, we could talk about your college football experience for hours, but let me ask you a couple questions that I'm really curious to know about. So, in your mind, what was the biggest game or the most important game that you ever played in college?
You know, oddly enough, looking back, you know, my freshman year, the Texas game on Thanksgiving night in 1987 was for the conference championship.
Yeah.
And we ended up winning the game 20-13. But looking back with just what was, you know, a conference championship was all on the line.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big game in all the games I played. Looking back, I mean, all the Texas games are big. Of course, the bowl games are big. Your conference games are big. But I'm not sure I played in another game that had that much ramifications to it, if you will.
Yeah.
So that was a big one for sure. And, and I was too young to even really comprehend, what was really going on. I appreciate it so much more now because, I tell 8-year-olds and I tell 60-year-olds, it's hard to win a championship at any level, in any sport. And don't take it for granted when you win one, because you might not ever get another opportunity. And so that was a big deal. And we ended up winning the conference championship again my senior year, which was a lot of fun. And but all the Texas games were, big games for us, the rivalry of that. And
beating Texas, I don't care whether they were up or whether they were down.
Yeah.
It was a battle, and Texas, obviously one of the most storied college football programs ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so to go beat those guys, whether we're number 2 in the country or they're number 2 in the country, it was, there were multiple games where there were upsets in those games. So, that doesn't surprise me to hear that. Well, let me ask you, you said something just now about not really appreciating the kind of the significance of that game. And you were, like I said, you were kind of one of those really, really popular players, but before social media. And so nowadays, instead of getting letters from disgruntled fans when you committed to A&M, you'd get tweets or, Facebook comments or stuff like that. So what was it like being so popular and so well loved, at least by the Aggies? You're probably hated by some of the other teams.
Yeah.
But what was it like as a young kid, as a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, having to deal with all that instant notoriety and fame?
Well, I mean, the Aggie Nation has been so kind to me through the years, over the years, when I was playing and after my football was over. I mean, it's great. I just, it's such a compliment. It's so humbling when somebody walks over to you, even today, and wants to take a picture with you, or wants you to take a picture with their children, or just wants to shake your hand. I mean, to me, it's the most humbling thing in the world. It makes me appreciate how much people care about their team and about their players. And I don't really know another way to describe it. It's the ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've always taken it. I never say no. I always have time. Because I know for a lot of people, it takes a lot of courage to walk over to somebody you never met and introduce yourself. And, so I've been that way to other people too.
No way. Not Bucky Richardson. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
It's funny you'd say that, because you and I played golf. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago. Played with a friend of ours, Dale Jefferson. I texted my dad's sister. My dad's class 65, granddad's class 38. My dad was a walk-on on the football team, huge Aggie. And his sister, I texted my dad. I said, "Hey, I'm playing golf with Bucky right now." He goes, "Oh, cool." And he told his sister, and she started texting me. She goes, "Oh, my God, Bucky, I can't believe you're playing with Bucky Richardson. Oh, my, tell him I said hi." That kind of thing. But it's, can you imagine being somebody like Johnny Manziel or Cam Newton or one of these guys in the age of social media, where every single thing you do gets filmed and tweeted and Facebook? I mean, these guys are under a tremendous amount of pressure. And sometimes I think we lose sight of the fact, Bucky, that they're still kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm grateful and thankful we didn't have that stuff back when we were in school. It's so hard growing up already. Yeah. Just trying to figure things out and growing up and trying to stay out of trouble. And this just kind of makes it easier for kids to get in a bad spot, and it's a whole nother set of issues that children have to deal with that we didn't. Yeah. And so it was like our era was just a lot simpler, it seemed like, in a lot of ways. the on the field stuff and the actual, playing the sport and doing all that's very comparable, but it's just off the field, managing what you're saying and doing and where you're going off the field it brings that to the surface real quick. And a lot of kids can handle it and do handle it, and a lot of kids struggle with it. And, we see it every day.
Yeah.
We see it every day.
For sure. Well, and, as the quarterback of a major Division I school,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to take the credit for the wins and you're going to get the criticism for the losses, whether it's true or not. I mean, that's just part of being in that position, generally speaking. So were you one of those athletes that would look at the press clippings, the negative and positive, or would you just kind of ignore all that stuff when you were playing?
I tried to ignore it. I just cared about winning. And when we didn't win, I took it as hard or harder than anybody.
Yeah.
And quarterbacks, that position, you're right. A lot of times we get singled out and probably get more credit than we deserve. And on the other side too, we might get a little bit more criticism when we're not successful, but that's part of the position. And that's part of what we talked about a little earlier, touched on a little earlier, is being able to handle that criticism, being able to see somebody write something that is not true or not accurate, or again, that's just his opinion. And how does that affect you? Do you let it affect you?
Yeah.
And that's part of the mental toughness that it takes to play the next play, go to the next day, practice harder the next day, just continue to try to improve. And you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. You're never going to make everybody happy. So you can't worry about it. Your family, your friends, your teammates is all I cared about. And
I tell my kids all the time, Bucky, I said, if everybody likes you, you're probably not doing anything of importance. I mean, if you're doing anything that's important, you're probably going to have some people that don't like you. And and you're just going to have
leadership is not a popularity contest.
I love that. I love it. Yeah.
Because you're going to have to say, I had a great relationship with all my linemen, but we held each other accountable.
Yeah.
I would say things to them that they didn't like, and they've said things to me that I didn't like. But that's part of respecting each other, trying to get the best out of each other. And it was some heated exchanges often, but it was out of love, not criticism. And we're trying to win a game, win a battle, and you got to be able to do that.
Let's talk about one of my favorite battles that you ever won, the 1990 Holiday Bowl. So let me give a little bit of background on this, and then you can tell from your perspective. From my perspective, BYU was acting like they were too good for us. They didn't want to play us because they thought they were better, way better. They thought they deserved a better bowl game. And so we went in there to play the Holiday Bowl, and they were wrong about that. I'll put it that way. So Bucky Richardson, when it's all said and done, I think had 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 passing touchdown, and caught a TD.
Yeah.
And it was at the end, the final score. I mean, it was almost they had to invoke the mercy rule at one point. So tell us about what that game was like from your perspective, Bucky.
Yeah, that game was, of course, great. Whenever you can win a bowl game like that, it's a great memory. But, I remember when they first, when Coach Slocum told us we were going to play in the Holiday Bowl, we were all excited. We felt like we had been, we deserved a January 1 game. We had a really good team, and we're playing well towards the end of the season. But nonetheless, we ended up at the Holiday Bowl out in San Diego, Jack Murphy Stadium, which was a great place to go visit for a week and to play out in San Diego. So we were excited about that and excited to get to play a top 10 team. And BYU at the time, I want to say, was about 5 or 6.
They were highly ranked. Yeah.
They were highly ranked, and we were around 10 or 11, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember in the days and weeks that followed, because there's about a month lag, right, before you get to play in the bowl game. They were coming out with articles. BYU players were upset because they felt like A&M wasn't ranked high enough.
Yeah.
We deserved a higher ranked opponent, a better opponent. And of course, our coaches do a good job of putting those articles up in the locker room, highlighting some of the things that they were saying. So we were walking by it all day, every day, reading it and seeing it, and it was great motivation for us. And we had good preparation in College Station before we left to go to San Diego, and we were there a week. We go a week early, and I forget the school we practiced at. It was a junior college there in the San Diego area. And man, I don't think I've ever been on a team that had that good of practices leading up to a game.
Yeah.
And everybody, I mean, we were having a ton of fun, and they have all these activities for you, and you got to go see all these things and go eat at these cool places. But man, when we took that bus over to that junior college, it was like we had blinders on, and we dialed it in for those 2 or 3 hours every day, and had great practices, intense, everybody on their toes, and we played like we practiced. You know, we played like we practiced that week, and you know, I can remember Coach Slocum telling me, he goes, "I knew we were going to play well because we practiced great." And that's that's another tricky thing about bowl games is when you go, you've got all this other stuff going on. You've got to dial in and get your work done and get your practice in and get your prep in so you can play well. And we did that and showed up. You know, they jumped on, and Ty Detmer was their quarterback who won the Heisman.
Yeah, very good quarterback.
Great player.
Yeah.
Great player.
Great player.
And they jumped up 7-0 on us. I think they scored on their first possession, then we got the ball and answered right back. So it's 7-7. And then we just started. Our defense played great, shutting down a great BYU offense, and our offense was clicking. And I don't think I've ever been played in a game where everything we did just worked, just like it was supposed to almost.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those magical nights where things went our way, things went well, we executed, great game plan. I mean, all that stuff. A great memory, a great trip. Everything about that trip was just so much fun, and a beautiful place in San Diego, and it was a big deal. And I think it catapulted us into 91 season too. A lot of momentum but yeah, it was. I think that's the reason why we played so well, is because we were so focused.
What another great insight into leadership. I hear this from prominent trial lawyers all the time too. They say we don't win the cases at the courthouse. We win the cases in the 2 or 3 months beforehand.
Yeah.
Ready for it's all in the preparation. So, you know, these lessons I think apply kind of across the board. You know, you don't win.
Yeah, you know, Brian, like I tell my son, if you want to have fun on Friday night, we're in it's February right now. This is where you're creating the fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too late. It's too late when you wait till Friday night.
Absolutely.
So it's a process to that for sure.
I've been telling my son for a while, I say, listen, I want you to have fun. That's number one. But guess what? Winning's a lot more fun than losing. And you learn how to win. You get prepared to win 6 months before the season actually starts. Right?
That's correct. That's right.
Well, Bucky, let me ask you one more question about your college football experience, because I'm curious. Who's the best college football player you ever played against or with, for either from a talent standpoint or from a productivity standpoint? And if you can't pick the best, maybe give us one or two who just, when you were playing with them, you're just like, wow, this cat's on a different level.
Yeah, I mean, I played with a lot of good players at A&M that, you know, Darren Lewis was an incredible running back. He had power, he had speed. He was a great teammate. He was productive. He was consistent, all those things. Greg Hill was a little bit different kind of running back. but some Richmond Webb was a great lineman. He should end up in the Hall of Fame at some point, and just a super, super guy. I think one of the guys I played against that I was just in awe was Barry Sanders.
You played against Barry. You got to see Barry Sanders in college. I didn't know that. What was that like?
We played them in '88 in Stillwater, and just got our brains beat out.
Yeah.
But I just remember watching Barry that night. He would make moves 6-7 yards deep in the backfield, and we had a really good defense, mind you. I mean, we were dang good.
Yeah.
And he would do things 6 or 7 yards from the line of scrimmage and just create his own crease almost.
Yeah.
Just an unbelievable talent, speed, and strength, and quickness and moves. He returned a punt for a touchdown on us that night, and just ran up and down the field. And I don't think I've ever been wowed more than I was that night by somebody that I played against. Just a special talent, gifted guy.
So you finish up your college career at A&M, and you get drafted into the pros. I think, were you drafted by the Houston Oilers at first?
Yeah.
And let's just say, don't take this the wrong way, Bucky, let's just say you were not the prototypical NFL quarterback, right?
No, of course I wasn't. No.
And so you go and play in the pros, and the play there's two plays that I remember the most. The one play I probably remember the most is when you threw a touchdown pass left-handed and you're right-handed. And I think it was to win the game. And, the reason, Bucky, that I love that play so much is because that just epitomized to me the way you played. You were you would have thrown the ball. You would have bounced the ball off your forehead if you needed to score a touchdown. You just did whatever it took, right? And then the other play I remember is when I think it was against the Cowboys, and somebody was offsides or something. They blew the whistle, but the Cowboys defensive end decided he didn't hear it, and he comes in and he just blasted you, and they didn't call for a penalty.
his name was Charles Haley.
Wow, I didn't know that was Charles Haley.
Yeah. And he was the only one in the stadium that didn't hear that whistle, and that was the first game I ever started in the NFL, and we lost a close game to Dallas. We played up in Cowboy Stadium. But yeah, he it's one of those, they jump, you jump, we jump, they jump. It's kind of confusing, and half the guys are going and half the guys aren't going. And of course, they blew the whistle. So I immediately just relaxed, which you should never do, by the way. So I just kind of relaxed, and Haley just comes, he's coming right at me. And I don't think I seen him coming, because I would have gotten out of his way or tried to. Yeah. But he put his headgear right in my chest plate and just took me to the ground. And I remember shaking that thing off and looking at that official going, now, if I was Troy Aikman, who was just throwing a flag, please.
Yeah, but if you breathe on Tom Brady now, you get called for 15 yards. Yeah. A little different back then. I mean, you can look at the NBA back then too. I was watching the NBA, man. Golly, it's the physicality of it. I mean, every one of those players be getting kicked out of the game nowadays for what they were doing back then.
And I think a lot of those changes are for the better, right? I mean, the more educated we get on things, we've got to make it safe as we can, safe as you possibly can, and technology with the helmets and protocols and all those things that we didn't have back when I played. And back then you would just come off the field and go, you got dinged, shake it off, you're going back in the next play.
Exactly.
It wasn't an option. You shook it off and you went back in. And so all those kind of things are for the better. But yeah, Charles Haley was a hit. And I think what you're talking about was a preseason game, oddly enough, against the Cowboys. And we drove down the field in 45 or 50 seconds and was able to throw a touchdown there at the end to win a preseason game. But that was a big deal.
Left-handed.
That's a big deal as a rookie. You know, you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get.
Yeah.
So when you get one, to go in and take advantage of it and do a 2-minute offense type of drive to win a game is, I think it helped me make the team for sure.
For sure. And you were actually asked, I think at one point, Bucky, you were asked by maybe one or maybe more teams if you would be interested in playing fullback or safety, I think. And you never ended up doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was in Houston my 4th training camp and got cut. That's when they hired Jeff Fisher, drafted Steve McNair from Alcorn State. And I ended up getting cut that training camp. New England picked me up off waivers. That's back when Bill Parcells was their head coach and Drew Bledsoe was their quarterback. And I went up there and it was the next day. I remember I was just heartbroken that I'd gotten cut and, you know, what's this mean and what's going to happen and am I ever going to get to play again? So, you know, that afternoon, my agent calls me and says, New England just picked you up off waivers. I just bought you a flight. You're going to Boston tomorrow. And so it's like, whoa, what? You know, what are you talking about? Yeah. So I did that. I was crying my eyes out on the way home from San Antonio, but I get on the plane the next day and go to Boston, and their training camp is about an hour and a half drive, small school outside of Boston. And the guy that picked me up said, Coach Parcells wants to talk to you before you do anything. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I get there and Coach Parcells basically told me, he goes, I'm not sure what position I'm going to like you at better, but I want to play you, of course, on all special teams. I want to play you at fullback, H-back, tight end. And he said, I know you've been playing quarterback a long time, and I just think you're a good enough athlete that you could maybe fill that void for us. And he goes, if you don't want to do that and you don't agree, I'll release you right now and get you back to the airport, and you can see if another team wants to pick you up to play quarterback. And, of course, I'm not going to tell Coach no. You know, I mean, that was just my attitude. I go, Coach, I'll do whatever you want. I'm here. I appreciate y'all picking me up. I'd love to be a New England Patriot. And that was my attitude. And, of course, I ended up getting cut later in training camp. And then Dallas actually picked me up. That was all in 90. I guess that was 95 training camp.
Yeah.
So.
And you were backing up Moose, Daryl Johnson, I think.
And they, you know, and what was weird about Dallas is there was like a week left in training camp. And I go, why would Dallas even bother signing me if they didn't think I would have a spot, or, you know, they had to feel good about me being on the team at some capacity, and ended up getting cut. It was me and another guy. It was down to the last spot, and there were 2 of us.
Yeah.
So I got cut. So I didn't play in 95, and you're always sitting by the phone, injuries, and, you know, I was staying in shape and doing my thing, and Kansas City Chiefs ended up calling me and signing me and wanted me to play quarterback, which I wanted to do. Steve Bono was their starting quarterback at the time, and Rich Gannon was the backup.
Wow.
Rich Gannon was having he was holding out. His contract was up. He was holding out, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to re-sign him or not, and they signed me. So I actually moved to Kansas City that offseason. I kept my house in Houston, and I had an apartment up in Kansas City, and just poured into their off-season program and playbook, and really trying to mentally get get up to speed where I, when the preseason games rolled around, I could compete and play well. And I did that and ended up getting cut, last cut again. And that's when I knew kind of in my heart that, maybe it's time for me to move on and do something else. I was as prepared as I've ever been. I was in great shape. I did everything right. I played well when I got a chance to play, and it just didn't happen. And I was fixing to get married, and I came home and I go, maybe it's time for me to move on. And my agent was like, no, let's hang in there. He was talking to the Canadian League, Montreal Alouettes. He goes, just go to Montreal with me and let's go meet with the Alouettes and see if we can get something worked out. They really want you. And, I said, well, it won't hurt to go visit with them and just see what it is and go check out Montreal, where they play, where they train, all that stuff. We spent the weekend up there with the GM. And then we got into contract talks, and at the time I was kind of already checked out. Yeah. Just my heart. And I told my agent at that time, I said, Frank, I'm not feeling it. Of course it's dang good money. I said, but it's in Canada. All those things. And again, I've just followed my instinct. Something was telling me it was time to move on, and I did. That's when in 96 I retired from playing.
You gave it everything you had.
Oh yeah.
In high school, in college, in the pros. Yeah. And so I would think, and tell me if I'm thinking about this right, I would think that you can look back and basically have no regrets. I mean, you did just about everything you could possibly do in football. But I want to ask you one or two quick questions, because all athletes have these war stories, these funny stories about stuff that has nothing to do maybe with the actual game itself. So I'll give you an example. When I was playing at A&M, I didn't play much. And so me and my walk-on buddies, we used to scope out the stands to see which school had the best looking co-eds. So I've heard that you have a couple of those stories, one of which is you had a guy when you're in Houston who would sell you hot dogs on the stands or on the sidelines, right?
Yeah. Yeah, actually it was the Buffalo, my rookie year. I think, Warren Moon was our quarterback, just Hall of Famer, unbelievable passer. I mean, he could just throw the heck out of it. And I don't know how this eventually got out, but we're playing Buffalo, and we had a first round bye. We're playing Buffalo in the playoffs, and we're winning by 35, 38 points.
Yeah.
10 minutes left in the third quarter. And I'm third team going into that game at the time, Warren Moon, Cody Carlson, and me. So I'm not going to play. So me and another guy on the team saw this guy eating a hot dog, and we asked one of our trainers, I go, can y'all go get me and Gary a hot dog? And he said, sure. He went and got us a hot dog during the game. We had to hide it. We had the big parkas on.
Because it's so cold. Yeah.
It was freezing up there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, somehow that ended up getting out, and we've had a lot of laughs about it ever since. But, we ate a hot dog on the sideline.
What about the story about the skydiving?
Not smart. Yeah, during the season, our off day was Tuesday. Everybody had off on Tuesday. We played Sunday, film and workout on Monday. You had off Tuesday, and then you started the work week Wednesday, getting ready for the next game. So me and I was good friends and still am with Gary Wellman, who played the Oilers for 3 or 4 years as well with me.
Oh, significant accomplishment. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And
hey, Gary, what's up if you're listening? Gary's buddy of mine too.
He played receiver at USC.
Great guy.
With Marinovich and Rodney Peete.
Yeah.
So, of course, the quarterback receiver, we hit it off instantly. He was one of the first guys I met when I got to training camp there, and we've been friends ever since. And Greg Montgomery was our punter.
Sure.
From Michigan State, and he just recently passed away. I don't know if you heard that or not. But the three of us decided that we wanted to go skydiving on our off day during the season, which is
not
now
smart. You look back on that and you'd be like, man, we'd play 36 holes of golf, right? So
I could just tell you, I wouldn't have done well with social media either if I'm going skydiving on my day off. So we go skydiving and of course it was scary and fun and thank goodness nothing happened to any of us. It was successful from that regard. But we showed up Wednesday back to practice, and Coach Pardee came over to me and he goes, I understand you went skydiving yesterday. And of course I'm not gonna lie to him. I said, yeah, that's it. It was fun. We had a great time, it was day off, whatever. And he just ripped me a new one. He said, don't you ever, ever, ever do that again. I mean, and it didn't even really register to us that it was really, really, really dumb idea, particularly during the season. It was
and it's not just, it's not just that skydiving is kind of dangerous, but also you guys in the NFL and all pro sports have contracts that say there are certain things you can and cannot do during the season.
Yeah. It was just a bad decision. And we were quickly told that was stupid and don't do that again or else. So we did. But that's being 51 now, looking back on that and just remembering all that, it's pretty funny now, for sure.
Well, Bucky, you had obviously the kind of athletic career that most people can only dream of. But then when you hung up your cleats, you started in the business world, and you've had a very successful business career as well. So tell us real quick, and I know we've gone a little bit over our time, so I've got a couple more questions for you. If you got a few more, minutes, Bucky?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So tell us, because like we were talking about earlier, there are athletes and other people that have a lot of success when they're young, and then when the fans go away, when the popularity goes, when all that stuff goes away, they don't do very well. And so what do you think it was about you in particular that when all this, you went from being one of the most famous people in the country and then being a pro athlete, and then all of a sudden all that goes away. What was it about you in particular that you were able to transition from that sort of adulation and accolades into just being a dad and a husband and a businessman?
Yeah, I see a lot of players struggle with that, Brian. Yeah. It's I tell people it's you're going to eat a big old piece of humble pie.
Yeah.
Because really that life is such a fairy tale. And with the fans and the travel and the way you're treated, the money you make, all those things, the way you're treated around town, and it's all because you have a jersey.
Yeah.
Right. And people think that lasts forever, and it doesn't. And I think you just have to take some humbleness about you, and you go to the next chapter in your life. And I think my father instilled that in me, to be able to handle that. And also the guy I went to work for 23 years ago, a guy named Charlie Milstead,
sure.
Who actually played quarterback at A&M, class of 61.
What a man. My dad remembers going to watch him play in the pros.
Yeah. And he's still with us. He's suffering from dementia pretty bad.
Struggling a little, yeah.
Parkinson's.
I'm real good friends with Lyle, so I hear about Charlie some of the time.
And Lyle's his son who I work with. We're in business together. And Charlie was a great mentor for me at the time. Just having he'd gone through it,
Yep.
of course, many years before, but he was a good sounding board for me. And you know what? He believed in me. I'll never forget, he told me, he goes, Bucky, you're used to game day being on Saturday or on Sunday. He goes, it's no different in business except every day's game day.
Yep.
Every day's game day. And he allowed me to be me. He was patient with me. He taught me a lot about business and believed in me and gave me a chance, and I just ran with it.
Probably kicked your butt in golf every time you played too. Very
man.
good golfer. Very good golfer.
He would just wear me out. Just, he just a good athlete, but he's one of the kindest, sweetest men, most unselfish. He's not a hypocrite.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go on and on and on, and just very blessed to have somebody like that when I first get into business, if you will, to be there to guide me and show me how to do it right. But yeah, Brian, I'll tell you, it took me a few years mentally to deprogram almost,
Exactly.
because those bursts of adrenaline and
Yep.
those highs, those natural highs, nothing can compare to when you're in a locker room full of your teammates and there's 80, 90, 100,000 people out there running out on that field, fixing to play a game. I mean, you can't duplicate that euphoria, if you
Yep.
will, in the business world. There's many days where you get excited, but it's different, right?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
the same feeling. It's just different. And I've had a lot of teammates that have really struggled post-career from football, transitioning in the business world, and it's sometimes it's hard to watch because it's just not easy. It's not easy. And but I think that's the reason. My father, of course, my wife is great, and then Charlie going to work for somebody like him really made it easier.
Having a mentor, and in particular, a mentor that can really empathize with your experience, no matter who you are, is exceptionally important. I'll tell you, Bucky, I'm sitting here when you're talking about this, drawing parallel. I have a lot of friends. My dad was a military grandfather, older brother. My mother was an Air Force nurse. She died when I was 10. But I have a bunch of military people, and I have a bunch of friends that were in the Marines, Army, Air Force, you name it, because I was in the Corps of Cadets. And it's very similar to the way I've heard it described when you go to combat. When you go to combat, it's like the most intense. You're a member of a team. You're so close. And the adrenaline is off the charts. And then so when some of our veterans come back, man, that's hard to readjust to, just being part of kind of normal society. And so, I did a podcast 2 days ago with a lady who started a veteran support group for that very reason, but very similar to what athletes go through, right?
Yeah, football is as probably close to you as you can get sport-wise.
Yeah.
To somebody that's in the military.
Yeah.
Now, nothing compares in the military, but we're making the comparison of the feeling, the adrenaline, the brotherhood, my comrade, my teammate, my brother. I mean, that's just a special, different environment. And when you're immersed in that environment for so long, it's hard when that's over to deprogram, if you will, and because you that's part of who you are.
Yeah.
And you've got to figure out a way to channel it differently. And you got to have people around you that believe in you and support you, and because it's humbling. I mean, I touched on it earlier. It's a humbling experience, and you're basically starting over. I'm a rookie again, right? I'm a freshman again. I'm the young guy again, going into that next phase of your life. And it's important to have people around you that can help you through that, because it's hard to do by yourself.
Well, Bucky, you've done by any measure, a phenomenal job of that. And, you know, I would say the number one marker of that is you are obviously a great husband and you're a great father. I have one more question for you, if you'll indulge me. I started this podcast. One of the reasons I started this podcast, Bucky, was during quarantine. I kind of was just sick and tired of seeing all the negativity and everybody bitching about everything, everybody fighting with everybody. And so I wanted to feature people like you that are positive, action-based leaders. And so I guess my last question for you, Bucky, is what are you telling the people around you? What are you telling your kids, your friends, your family about, you know, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. We've got these protests and some racial unrest. The political stuff is crazy, no matter what side you're on. And so it's tough times for a lot of people. And so what do you see over the next 6, 8, 12 months? What are you telling people about how we can kind of get through all this stuff as a country together? Like, what, coach us up a little bit. Tell us what advice you have.
Well, I mean, it's been hard. You know, it's been hard for everybody. It's something that we've never lived through or had to deal with, and it's when I think about all that, a lot of emotions run through me, and most of it is confusion, right? Some sadness to see people going out of business that didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
To see, of course, people that are dying too. You know, in instances like this, I think you just do what you can do. You follow the rules. Always be part of the solution. There's a lot smarter people that the experts, if you will, that are I think trying to lead us the right way. I think it's fluid. New things are popping up. They're learning new things all the time. And I think this is just one of those where you got to tighten up your bootstraps and get through the next day. Yep. You know, I you know, as a dad with kids in school, you know, my son being a senior, my youngest daughter being a junior in high school, to see how it's affected them, and just by not physically being able to go to school, and you know, I guess they quit school last year in March.
Yeah.
And I never in a million years thought I'd hear my kids say I miss school. But
same here, Bucky.
Yeah. When it's taken away, you realize how good it is, you know, and I think a lot of the things that we're used to have been kind of taken away from us. And it's hard to comprehend, really. I always believe in being part of the solution. I'm gonna do as much as I can the right way to help get through it faster, because I'm ready for things to get back to normal and see people smiling again, and see people free. You know, that's
you and me both, brother. You and me both. You know, I told my kids they just went back to school in person last week, and I said, you know, don't go to any big parties before the day before. I mean, be smart about it, because you guys want to be in school. You want to play sports. I want that to happen too. So let's make some sacrifices that aren't really that big of sacrifices, so we can do all this stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. I just really feel for, you know, all the people business-wise that nobody ever saw this coming.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden they shut your doors and they tell you can't open, and man, I just, a lot of sadness, you know, a lot of sadness looking at that, having to see that as much as we are right now.
Yeah. Well, John Powell Richardson, AKA Bucky, I got to tell you, man, you gave so much pleasure and satisfaction and happiness and memories to so many people. And I think, in my opinion, the reason that people loved you so much is because that you could see when you were playing that Bucky Richardson was a leader. Bucky Richardson left it all on the field. He went out there, he played his ass off as hard as he could in every game. And that's why people love you, man. And I just want to say that, you know, in my opinion, And it feels weird to say this, Bucky, because you're only 2 years older than me, but you were one of my athletic heroes when I was when I was at A&M, and I know I'm speaking for a lot of people when I say that, but more importantly, not only were you a great athlete that gave a lot of people a lot of happiness and a lot of memories, but you've turned into a great human being and a great businessman, and like we said earlier, most importantly, a great husband and a great father. So, Bucky, I really appreciate your time. I know you got a lot going on, man. This was an awesome time, and let's go play golf sometime.
Let's do it, Brian. I applaud you for all your success on the podcast. I've heard nothing but great things, and I appreciate all your nice words. It means a lot, and Aggies have been good to me for sure.
Gig 'em, Aggies.
Gig 'em.
You've been listening to Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. If you've enjoyed this week's interview, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and keep up with the latest episodes. You can also connect with Brian through his firm at vbattorneys.com.